I'll discuss a little bit about what it was like to be in a mental hospital in the mid-60s, back when patients were still required to work. And I remember going with the attendant and my father driving around the grounds to the admissions building, and I saw a greenhouse. And I said, gee, it'd be nice to work in a greenhouse if I could. And the attendant said, well, that's just for the longer term patients. Well, I didn't want to become a longer term patient, so I forgot about the greenhouse. Unlocked the door, down the hall, and here's this chicken wire gate. And he unlocked that. And something about the chicken wire, that reinforced glass, I forget exactly, but I remember feeling when it locked behind me, that boom, I was in for real. Then you had to take a bath with the attendant down the hall. The only exit was you turn in all your clothes, you get hospital fitting clothes. You could tell it so that it would sound like it was a horrible thing. But in reality, when I got into the first floor, the admissions ward, which was locked down and had these heavy screens on the windows. I mean, it was a sheet of metal with holes drilled into it. There wasn't no window screen. And it was pretty hard to see out. You had to get your eye right up to it like that to make out much except light shade. It was sort of like a impressionistic painting of the outside. Gave me my beds, and there was my little bunk in one corner of this large room that was all open except for little walls that were just, like 4 feet high. So the nurse, the patients, and everybody could see the whole thing at once. And then there was a little door, and there was a small recreation. I remember thinking that I was safe now, right? I mean, but you have urges to do things that you don't want to do, like kill your father. It's kind of nice to be locked up and to have somebody else hold the key. I never had the slightest urge. Now, as I was saying before I was interrupted by the phone call, that since college days, and maybe before, that I would end up in a mental hospital. I don't know why I thought it, I just did. And I remember when I was in college riding with someone in a car, and we had to drive past their local mental hospital, and I saw the people out sitting on the benches and stuff, and I thought, gee, that must be kind of tough to be there sitting. You couldn't hop in your car and go to the drugstore or something like that. And of course, when I got into mental hospital, I learned that, being able to sit down, I mean, that was a special privilege that they just didn't hand to everybody. And it took me quite a while before I got anywhere near that privilege. Basically, everyone was diagnosed as schizophrenic. That was kind of the one diagnosis they had, I don't know. And so that's how I was diagnosed. And the first big problem, and of course the thought in all our minds was, yeah, I needed help, but I also wanted to get out. I didn't want to spend couple of years in this hospital, and they said, well, 7 months, right? And I thought, well, yeah, let's shoot for those 7 months. So I was very cooperative. I turned in my bracers. they gave you razors, but they dispensed the blades just before you shaved. And the bathroom was all open, even the stalls and stuff. So, and then you came back and you turned in your blades, and they were kind of dull blades, but they did the job. And the first big hurdle was you had to talk to your doctor, and 1 week, 2 weeks goes by, and you haven't talked to your doctor. Well, it turned out it wasn't much of a miss because the doctor was a fundamentalist, like my parents, and really not exactly the type of person I wanted to bare my soul to. But sooner or later, you learned that going before staff was the first big hurdle. And going before staff meant this. After you'd had your 3 sessions with the shrink, attendants would come in and say you're going before staff, and they ushered you out of your locked ward. We went out of the locked ward at various occasions. We went out to go to the cafeteria, morning, noon, and night, and we went to movies, and they had dances upstairs in the rec room in another ward, and the men and the women could mix and we could dance together. So, but they let us out, and this was a separate little room, and I remember there was a lamp and some chairs, and of course we didn't have any lamps in the back of my ward. So we sat down and you waited, and there were like 3 of us. The first one went in, it came out, and she got a little nervous all the time. They had magazines by who could read, and finally they ushered me into the main room, and here was like a little theater with a stage and a chair where you sat, and there were rows of medical staff, and behind them were the nurses. Now, of course, my hometown wasn't too far away, and some of those nurses could have been from my hometown. But then they ask you simple questions like, what's your name, and this and that. It was very hard to figure out what the hell they were looking for. And it was very scary because some people got bounced from staff to the center building. And the center building was for longer term patients, so you didn't want to get bounced that way. Well, I made it through staff. I moved into the treatment ward. That's where they gave shock therapy. I waited quite a while for my turn at shock therapy. Well, a little more on this and another tape. I don't want to run too long, but just remember that mental hospitals, well, they weren't perfect back in those days. They still had a lot of people who are very interested in helping those of us with mental problems. And I really appreciate what they did for me at that hospital.